How you guys doing today? This is the garden bed, the big one, the new one, and this is how to over-engineer it. Okay, so this thing is not a kit set. This is completely homemade. As you know, I moved into a new house a couple months ago, and summer is coming. It's springtime right now, and it is time for gardening. Now, with this particular house we're in now, we have a fairly small back section, but we have one spot in particular where we do have space for a big garden bed, and that is this garden bed. This thing measures 2.7 meters long, 600 millimeters deep, and 400 millimeters high. It's also going to take 1 metric fuck ton of soil to put into it. We're probably going to need to get a trailer and put a hell of a lot of soil in this thing. And so I've already gone through this process of watching videos and learning how to make garden beds, and one thing that I sort of learned from it is that, especially if you use recycled materials and you don't build them strong enough, you can sort of under-engineer them, and when you under-engineer them, i.e. don't make it strong enough, they will start falling apart on you. And this one is very strong. It is over-engineered, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this garden bed so that if you decide you want to build a big garden bed for growing vegetables, we're going to be growing tomatoes and cucumbers in this thing, you may want to learn from what you're going to see in this video. First off, some basic specifications. The panels are 12mm thick plywood. They are fixed by a combination of nails and screws. Screws are important. On the inside we have several of these garden stakes. These measure approximately 30mm by 40mm. The exact size you use doesn't really matter too much. They go all the way around the entire garden bed. You see them in the corners. Now you also see a lining of polythene plastic here. The parts at the end are actually recycled because they're old pallet fire bags. So if you can recycle materials, definitely do that. Now the entire garden bed has also been stained with raw linseed oil. Okay, linseed oil. Linseed oil, by coating it, by painting it on with a brush, linseed oil basically stops the wood from warping, and it sort of helps to preserve it. It's basically a way you can treat the timber yourself. Get raw linseed oil, do not get boiled linseed oil. And all of this polythene here is attached just with staples, and you don't need to buy an industrial a strong staple gun. You can just use a regular stapler. Now, despite how it looks, all of this decking timber on the top, which is forming the trim, is really completely optional. It's just to make it look nice, and you can kind of use it as a seat to sit on the top of it if you want. But you'll also see decking timber around the sides, and that is a very deliberate and strategic move. Okay, one thing you got to take into consideration if you're going to build a big garden bed like this is that there's actually going to be mass inside the garden bed of the soil, and that soil is actually going to be pushing outwards. You know, as gravity wants that soil to, you know, become flat and spread out, it's actually going to be pushing against the sides of the garden bed. So this is actually quite a long garden bed. This is, you know, 2.7 meters long, and you do have to take some steps to mitigate the the warping and the bending of the plywood, because this is only 12mm thick plywood. Okay, now what I'm about to tell you now, this is the absolute crux of what it means to over-engineer a garden bed. Better to over-engineer than under-engineer. The solution is threefold. The first way we stop the wood from warping and pushing outwards is having the stakes go into the ground. So that is going to help the bottom half of the garden bed from, you know, pushing out, because it's going to be essentially anchored in the ground. The second way is by nailing all of the trim on the top, and it's being nailed to the actual panels themselves and also to the stakes. That is going to help the top half of the panels to stop from warping outwards. And lastly, these extra pieces of trim, of decking timber that are on the outside of the garden bed, and they go all the way around, they're essentially going to form like a large, strong brace, which is, you know, because that is thicker, it's harder to bend, so it's going to offer resistance to you know, the warping and flexing of the timber. Why is all this important? Well, all this stuff is important. It's important to over-engineer it, because this thing could be in the ground for 10 or 20 years. You don't know how long it's going to be here. And if you want to build it to last, you need to build it well. You need to over-engineer it. I don't know how long we're going to be in this house. We could be in this house 5-10 years, I don't know. But I don't want to have to go and replace this thing because I didn't build it well enough in the beginning. So definitely use recycled materials if you can. But if you want strong, then you really need to buy new materials. In this garden bed, it is new materials. So let me do a Google search and I'll see if I can find some images of garden beds that are falling down and what happens when you under-engineer them. I got it in the ground now, so guess we should put some weed mat in and fill this thing up with some potting soil, huh?